What is the weirdest thing you've seen at a fast food place? First user. Picture this. It's a quiet Tuesday afternoon, and you're just stopping by a McDonald's for a quick bite. The smell of fries, grease, and desperation fills the air as you make your way to the restroom, blissfully unaware of the bizarre spectacle about to unfold. As you push open the door, expecting the usual, maybe a sticky floor, maybe a lack of soap, you're instead greeted by what can only be described as a scene straight out of a dystopian nightmare. The bathroom has been commandeered by a group of homeless people who decided that, of all places, a McDonald's restroom was the perfect venue for an impromptu orgy. Yes, an actual orgy. It was as if the usual restroom graffiti had come to life in the most twisted, nightmarish way possible. Bodies tangled together in ways that no fast food joint was ever meant to accommodate, all under the flickering light of a single, struggling fluorescent bulb. I was frozen in place, my brain refusing to process the chaos before me. It was like my eyes were trying to convince my brain that this wasn't happening, that I was in some strange fever dream. But the smell, the potent mix of McDonald's grease and human activity, was all too real. The noise, too, was an unholy mix of moans and the odd squelch of someone stepping on something that should probably never be stepped on. My senses were under assault from every direction, and just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I remembered that this was a McDonald's, a place where children frequently visit. My panic set in like a wave crashing against the shore. What if some innocent kid, on a mission for a happy meal, stumbled into this adult-rated horror show? I could see the headlines now. Child scarred for life by McDonald's bathroom incident. Without thinking, I turned on my heel and stationed myself outside the door, my body acting as an impromptu barricade. I became the unwitting bathroom bouncer of this sad, greasy circus. I dialed 911 with shaking hands, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation to the operator, who probably thought I was pulling some sort of prank. An orgy? In a McDonald's bathroom? Are you sure, sir? Yes, I was sure. I was horrifyingly, regrettably sure. As I waited for the police, I fended off a stream of unsuspecting customers with a hurried, out of order, and a desperate smile, all while trying to block out the sounds from within. When the cops finally arrived, they were as stunned as I had been. It took a team of officers to disperse the group, and as they did, the bathroom was transformed from a scene of chaos to one of shame and awkwardness. The participants shuffled out, heads down, their brief, bizarre fantasy shattered. The police were left to clean up the mess, both literally and figuratively, while I was left with the kind of story that no one ever wants to have in their repertoire. As I walked away from that McDonald's, the smell of fries and broken dreams still hanging in the air, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of pride and horror. Pride, because I had managed to keep some semblance of order in the most unexpected situation. Horror, because every time I see a McDonald's now, I'm haunted by the memory of what I witnessed. It's safe to say I haven't set foot in a McDonald's bathroom since. Second user. Let me set the scene. It's the dead of night, and hunger strikes like a thief in the night. You find yourself at one of those questionable fried chicken joints that only seem to get busier as the hours get later. The kind of place where the food is cheap, the service is questionable, and the customers are even more so. You know you should probably be at home, sleeping like a normal person, but here you are, waiting in line for a greasy fix, when suddenly, things take a turn for the weird. As I approach the counter, I notice something odd, something downright bizarre. Behind the cashier, in the staff area that should be off limits to customers, there's a woman sitting in a chair by the deep fryer. But she's not just any woman, she's dressed like she's about to head out to the club. Full makeup, high heels, the works. She's casually nibbling on some fries, her perfectly manicured fingers daintily picking them up one by one, all while scrolling through her phone like she's just hanging out at a coffee shop, not sitting in the middle of a greasy fast food kitchen. Now, I've seen my fair share of strange things, but this takes the cake, or, more accurately, the chicken wing. The woman is completely at ease, even as the employees work around her like she's an official part of the operation. The manager, a burly man with a permanent scowl etched into his face, chats with her as if this is just another day at the office. My mind is racing with questions. Who is she? What is she doing here? Is this some kind of underground club where fast food meets adult entertainment? I scan the room, looking for hidden cameras or a film crew, because surely this has to be some kind of prank. But no, this is real life, and I'm smack dab in the middle of it. As I finally reach the counter, my curiosity gets the better of me. I ask the cashier, a lanky teenager who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, "Who's that?" I nod towards the woman behind him. He glances over his shoulder, shrugs, and says, "Oh, her? She's just hanging out." Hanging out? Hanging out? Since when do people hang out behind the counter of a fried chicken joint like it's their living room? The woman, noticing that she's the subject of our conversation, flashes me a smile that's both knowing and unnerving. She pops another fry into her mouth and goes back to her phone, completely unbothered by the fact that she's turning this fast food joint into her personal VIP lounge. The manager continues to chat with her, his demeanor calm and familiar, like this is just another day in his peculiar little empire. I finally place my order, my mind still reeling from the strange scene unfolding behind the counter. As I wait for my food, I can't help but let my imagination run wild. Is she a regular here? Does she come every night, sitting by the fryer like some kind of fast food queen? Or is this a one-time thing, a bizarre encounter that I'll never fully understand? And what's the deal with the manager? Is he paying her to be here? Is this some sort of fast food side hustle? The whole situation feels like it's teetering on the edge of reality and fiction, like I've stumbled into an alternate universe where fried chicken and high heels are somehow linked. My food finally arrives, and I grab the bag with a quick thanks, eager to get out of there before things get any weirder. As I walk out the door, I take one last look back, half expecting the woman to wink at me, as if she knows something I don't. But she's too busy scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the chaos she's causing in my brain. It's only later, as I sit in my car, devouring the greasy chicken like it's my last meal on earth, that I start to laugh. The whole situation was so absurd, so utterly ridiculous, that it almost felt like a scene from a movie. Maybe I'll never know the true story behind the midnight chicken hooker, but one thing's for sure, it's a story I'll be telling for years to come. After all, who wouldn't want to hear about the time I found myself in a fried chicken joint with a hooker sitting behind the counter like she owned the place? Third user. The simple pleasures of fast food, a greasy burger, some salty fries, and maybe a soda if you're feeling fancy. It's a no-frills, in-and-out kind of experience. At least, that's what you'd expect. But there I was, ready to chow down on my double bacon cheeseburger, when I noticed something that made me question everything I thought I knew about fast food culture. Across the room, at a table that looked like it had seen better days, sat a man who had apparently decided that eating a burger with his hands was far too pedestrian. Instead, he had laid out a full dining experience, complete with a knife and fork. Yes, you heard that right, a knife and fork. For a burger. I watched in stunned silence as he delicately sliced into his burger, as if he were at a 5-star restaurant and not a place where the only Michelin stars belonged to the tires on delivery trucks. He wasn't just eating, he was dining. There was a precision to his movements, a grace in the way he handled each piece of food, that made it clear this was no ordinary meal. His napkin was folded neatly in his lap, and he used it to dab at his mouth after each bite, like he was trying to impress someone, or maybe he was just trying to impress himself. It was hard to tell. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his gaze fixed intently on his plate, and yes, he had even brought his own plate, meticulously placing the burger on it, carefully arranging the fries in a neat little pile on the side. This wasn't just a meal, it was an art form. I half expected him to pull out a little salt shaker and sprinkle it over his fries like some kind of gourmet chef, but instead, he picked up a fry, examined it like he was appraising fine wine, and then dipped it, no, not dunked, but dipped, into a tiny pool of ketchup that he had poured out with the precision of a surgeon. This man wasn't just eating a burger, he was elevating it to an experience. I could practically hear classical music playing in the background as he savored each bite, chewing slowly, deliberately, as though each morsel contained the secrets of the universe. His pinkies, of course, were up, because why wouldn't they be? This was clearly a man who believed in bringing a touch of class to even the most humble of meals. As I watched, half in awe and half in disbelief, I started to wonder what his story was. Was he some kind of eccentric billionaire, slumming it in fast food joints for the thrill? Or maybe he was a food critic on a secret mission to find the hidden gems of the burger world. Or perhaps, he was just someone who refused to let the world dictate how he should enjoy his meal. Whatever the case, it was clear that this was a man who marched to the beat of his own drum, or, in this case, the gentle clink of his knife and fork against his plate. Other diners were starting to notice him too. A couple at the next table exchanged glances, trying to stifle their laughter. A group of teenagers at the back were openly gawking, snapping pictures with their phones, probably to post on social media with captions like "only in, insert city name here," or "who eats a burger like this?" But the man was completely oblivious to the attention he was drawing. Or, more likely, he just didn't care. He was in his own little world, where burgers were meant to be savored, not scarfed down. As he moved on to the second half of his burger, cutting it with the precision of a jeweler slicing a diamond, I found myself almost hypnotized by the sheer absurdity of it all. Here I was, surrounded by people who were devouring their meals like they were in a race against time, and there he was, treating each bite like it was his last meal on earth. It was bizarre, sure, but there was something oddly admirable about it too. He had taken something as mundane as a fast food meal and turned it into a ritual, a moment of zen in a world that was anything but. Eventually, I finished my own meal, though I have to admit, it didn't taste as good after watching his performance. I was about to leave when I noticed that the man had finally finished his burger. But he wasn't done yet. Oh no, there was still the matter of dessert. From a small, leather-bound case that he had brought with him, he pulled out a single, elegant cookie. He placed it on his now empty plate and, with the same meticulous care he had shown the burger, began to break off tiny pieces and savor them one by one. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. So, as casually as I could, I walked past his table and said, "Excuse me," I couldn't help but notice. "Do you always eat fast food like this?" He looked up at me, his expression calm and composed, as if he had been expecting the question. "Only when I want to truly enjoy it," he said, his voice as smooth as the movements of his hands. "You see, food is more than just sustenance. It's an experience, a moment to be cherished. Even a simple burger deserves that respect." I nodded, unsure how to respond, and continued on my way. As I stepped out into the fresh air, leaving the surreal scene behind, I couldn't help but smile. It was strange, yes, but in a world where everything feels rushed and chaotic, maybe there was something to be said for slowing down, even if it's just for a burger and fries. Still, the next time I hit up a fast food joint, I think I'll stick to the tried and true method, using my hands. Fourth user. It was a typical day in fast food land, where the air is thick with the smell of fries and the occasional scream of a child denied a second milkshake. I was enjoying my meal in relative peace when suddenly, I noticed a guy at the next table wrestling with a ketchup packet like it was some sort of wild animal. This wasn't just any ketchup packet, it was the mother of all stubborn condiments. He tried to tear it open with his hands, his teeth, even his car keys, but it refused to yield. By now, his face was turning redder than the ketchup inside, and you could see the frustration boiling over. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of struggle, he decided enough was enough. He gripped the packet with the determination of a man who had been wronged by the universe and squeezed it with all his might. Time seemed to slow down as the inevitable happened. The packet exploded with the force of a mini volcano, launching its contents into the air in a perfect, slow-motion arc. What happened next was nothing short of a disaster movie. The ketchup rocketed out like it had been launched from a slingshot, spraying across the room with pinpoint accuracy. It was like watching a red missile soar through the sky, except the sky was a fast food joint, and the missile was a condiment. The ketchup's trajectory was a thing of beauty, really, if you could ignore the impending disaster. At that very moment, a girl at the next table was about to take a bite of her burger, blissfully unaware of the condiment bomb headed her way. The ketchup hit her square in the side of the face, splattering all over her, her food, and even her meticulously arranged table. It was like a horror movie in food form. Her burger, once a simple meal, was now a crime scene, with ketchup evidence splattered everywhere. The entire restaurant went silent as all eyes turned to the girl. She sat there in stunned silence, her mouth half open in shock, her once pristine outfit now resembling a modern art masterpiece, if that masterpiece was made of ketchup, anyway. The poor guy who had caused the mess looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. His face was a mix of horror, embarrassment, and regret, all rolled into one. He opened his mouth to apologize, but no words came out. What could he possibly say to make up for this disaster? As for the girl, she slowly set her burger down, wiping the ketchup from her face with a napkin that was woefully inadequate for the task. Her expression was one of pure rage, the kind of rage that could make a grown man weep. If looks could kill, that guy would have been 6 feet under. The rest of us were torn between laughing at the sheer absurdity of the situation and feeling secondhand embarrassment for the poor guy who had just turned a simple lunch into a nightmare. Eventually, the staff came over, offering apologies and a mountain of napkins, but the damage was done. The girl got up, gave the guy one last death glare, and walked out, her ketchup-stained dignity trailing behind her. The guy, now the subject of every whispered conversation in the place, slunk down in his seat, his appetite long gone. He might have been hungry before, but now all he wanted was to vanish from existence. As for me, I finished my meal in silence, watching as the drama unfolded around me. I couldn't help but feel a little bad for the guy, after all, who hasn't had a condiment mishap at some point? But this was on a whole other level. It was a reminder that in the world of fast food, even the most mundane of items, a ketchup packet, can turn into a weapon of mass embarrassment. And as much as I wanted to laugh, I made a mental note to be extra careful the next time I opened a ketchup packet. You never know when it might decide to go rogue. Fifth user. It was a typical day at Penn Station, where the food is overpriced, and the pizza is often more cardboard than cuisine. I had just grabbed a slice and found a spot at one of the communal tables, a small victory in a place where seating is as rare as finding a quiet spot during rush hour. I was about to take my first bite when a woman approached my table with a baby in tow. Now, I'm all for sharing tables, but what happened next was something I could never have predicted. Without so much as a word, the woman plopped her baby down on the table, yes, the very table where my pizza was sitting, and started rummaging through her bag. At first, I thought she was just looking for something, maybe a pacifier or a toy, but then she pulled out a diaper. My brain struggled to keep up with what was happening. Surely, she wasn't about to, but yes, she was. Before I could react, she began changing the baby's diaper right there on the table, in full view of everyone. My slice of pizza, once a beacon of cheesy goodness, was now a mere foot away from what was quickly becoming a biohazard zone. I sat there, frozen in horror, my appetite fleeing faster than a commuter late for a train. The smell hit me like a freight train, and suddenly, my pepperoni pizza was the last thing on my mind. The woman, for her part, seemed completely unfazed by the situation. She went about her business with the efficiency of a seasoned professional, wiping, powdering, and changing with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The fact that she was doing it on a table in a public pizza joint, surrounded by horrified onlookers, didn't seem to bother her in the slightest. As the reality of the situation sank in, I looked around, hoping to find some support, some validation that this was indeed as insane as it felt. The other diners were just as shocked as I was, their faces a mix of disgust and disbelief. Some looked away, trying to pretend they hadn't seen anything, while others stared in morbid fascination, unable to tear their eyes away from the train wreck unfolding before them. By now, the entire restaurant was on high alert. The staff, who had clearly never dealt with a situation like this before, huddled together, whispering and pointing, but no one seemed willing to intervene. After all, what do you even say to someone who thinks a pizza joint is an appropriate place to change a diaper? Eventually, one brave employee ventured over, a strange smile on her face, and said, "Ma'am, we have restrooms available for that." The woman looked up, as if noticing her surroundings for the first time. "Oh, it's fine," she said with a wave of her hand, as if she were brushing off a minor inconvenience. I'm almost done." And with that, she finished the job, packed up her baby, and walked off, leaving behind a table that now required a hazmat team. I sat there, stunned, my pizza now cold and thoroughly unappetizing. The whole experience had been so surreal, so out of the realm of normal fast food encounters, that I didn't even know how to process it. The woman was gone, but the smell, the horror, the sheer audacity of what had just happened lingered in the air like a bad dream. The staff quickly moved in, disinfecting the table with a level of thoroughness usually reserved for crime scenes. They shot me apologetic looks, but what could they say? "Sorry about the impromptu diaper change during your lunch, just didn't seem adequate." I watched as they scrubbed and wiped, trying to erase all traces of the event, but the damage was done. My appetite was gone, and so was my desire to ever eat pizza in Penn Station again. As I left the restaurant, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Who changes a diaper on a table where people are eating? And in a pizza joint, no less? It was the kind of story you'd expect to hear as a joke, not witness in real life. But there it was, burned into my memory, a tale of fast food, babies, and boundaries crossed. Sixth user. If you've ever worked in fast food, you know that strange requests are just part of the job. But nothing could have prepared me for the day a guy walked up to the counter and asked for a sad meal. Yes, you heard that right, not a happy meal, but a sad meal. I thought he was joking at first, but the look in his eyes told me he was dead serious. He wanted a meal devoid of joy, a culinary experience that reflected the bleakness of his soul. And who was I to deny him that? So, I put on my best, "I'm totally not judging you" face and asked him, "How would you like your sad meal, sir?" He sighed deeply, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders, and said, "Just, not so happy. Light on the happy. Extra sad." Well, if it's sadness you want, sadness you shall receive, I thought. I grabbed a Happy Meal box and proceeded to strip it of all its happiness. First, I drew a sad face on the box, big, droopy eyes, a frown that could turn milk sour, and even a single tear for added effect. Next, I removed the toy, because nothing says sad like a meal with no joy to be found. But that wasn't enough. I needed to go the extra mile to really drive home the sadness. So, I grabbed a pen and a scrap of paper and started writing down the most depressing words I could think of: phlegm, fester, moist, larvae, leech, potluck, porridge. I threw in Monday, for good measure, because who likes Mondays? I slipped the note into the box where the toy should have been and sealed it up, my masterpiece of melancholy complete. When I handed it to him, he looked at it for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, he smiled, a small, sad smile, but a smile nonetheless. "Perfect," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He took his sad meal and walked out, leaving me standing there, wondering what kind of world we live in where someone can find solace in a box of fast food that's been drained of all happiness. As the door swung shut behind him, I couldn't help but feel a little bit of that sadness myself. What kind of life leads someone to seek out a sad meal? What heartbreak, what existential dread drives a person to find comfort in the bleakness of a toyless Happy Meal box? I'd seen plenty of strange things in my time at McDonald's, but this one stuck with me in a way I couldn't quite shake. The rest of the day passed in a blur of Big Macs and McNuggets, but I kept thinking about the sad meal guy. Who was he? What had happened to him? I imagined a backstory for him, something out of a tragic indie film: lost love, a dead-end job, dreams deferred until they faded into nothingness. Or maybe he was just someone who found the constant cheerfulness of the world exhausting, and all he wanted was a meal that matched his mood. Whatever the case, he had left his mark on me, and on that day's inventory of Happy Meal boxes. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again, but I knew one thing for sure: if he ever came back, I'd be ready to serve up another helping of existential dread, McDonald's style. After all, it's not every day you get to create a sad meal, and it's not every day someone asks for one. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment and follow for more stories.